Bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue sur le Facebook Live du FSJU-Centre d'art et de culture pour cette rencontre exceptionnelle. Ce soir est la première dans le cadre du festival Diasporama, regard sur le cinéma juif international. Une rencontre exclusive ce soir avec Doron et Yoav Paz, les réalisateurs du film Plan A, un film inédit que vous avez pu voir sur le site du festival et que vous pouvez toujours visionner jusqu'à ce soir minuit. Le festival Diasporama est une initiative du Centre d'art et de culture et du Fonds social juif unifié en partenariat avec l'ensemble des centres culturels juifs de France. Je voudrais remercier très chaleureusement Jérémia Becerra du Festival du film juif de Toronto qui est avec nous ce soir, Susan Starkman qui va mener l'interview, ainsi que Jules Davio à la traduction simultanée. Le festival Diasporama se poursuit jusqu'au 2 février. On vous attend nombreux. Rendez-vous sur le site www.fffj.fr pour découvrir toute la programmation. Suzanne, let's go.
Sorry, everybody. Let's start again. My name is Susan Starkman, and I'd like to introduce you all to Yoav and Doron Paz, the directors of Plan A. The duo of Yoran and Doron Paz are known for the films Jerusalem, a sci-fi horror in the Holy City, released in 2015, and Golem, on the Jewish legend. The script here is based on a true story and is by Israeli Dina Porat's book, Nakam. And it's set in Nuremberg in 1945. So I'm going to start with both of you. I don't know which director wants to take over which question. Maybe you can do one each. But what I first want to ask is, where did you first hear the story about Plan A? How did it come to you?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story because we growing up in Israel, you think you know all the Holocaust stories there is, and you hear so much of them from a very early age, maybe even too early age, but you grow up with these stories. And like, I think it was like 10 years ago, I mean, Yoav was sitting on a roof with a friend of ours, and he just started telling us his grandfather's story, a personal story, and it was about his grandfather coming back after the war, and locating the guy that told the Nazis about his family, and that's why the Nazis took his family and killed them. And he just caught the guy, survived the camps, and he took him to the barn and just killed him, shot him in the head. So for me, Yoav, it was like really exciting to hear a revenge story like this. And we thought, okay, this is a very unique, personal revenge story. And it's something that not a lot of people talking about here in Israel, about the revenge aspect. We can go into that deeper later on. But once we heard this story, we started researching about revenge, Jewish revenge. And we realized that this is a unique and amazing field that no one ever explored. And what really blew our mind is that we came up with a story, we found a story about Plan A. And this Plan A story wasn't a personal revenge, it was a national revenge. So, and then at the spot, me and Yoav decided this is going to be our next feature film, which we were wrong, by the way, because we took us 2 films to make this one. we had to wait a long time to have this story.
So you had this idea before you made your other films?
Sorry guys to interrupt, I just need to translate what's been said so far. Alors aujourd'hui, nous sommes très heureux et privilégiés d'avoir en notre compagnie Yoav et Doron Paz, le tandem de frères qui a réalisé le film que vous avez vu en première, Plan A. Ils sont surtout connus pour Jérusalem, un film d'épouvante de science-fiction sorti en 2015, ainsi que pour le film Le Golem, inspiré de la légende juive. Cette fois-ci, par contre, le script se fait l'écho d'une histoire vraie et s'inspire de Nakam, un roman. Et l'action se déroule à Nuremberg en 1945. La première question est la suivante. J'aimerais savoir comment est-ce que vous avez pour la première fois entendu parler des circonstances entourant l'élaboration du plan A. La réponse est la suivante. Étant très jeune, ce sont des histoires avec lesquelles nous avons grandi. Et il y a à peu près, quand nous avions 10 ans, nous étions assis sur un toit avec un ami qui nous a alors raconté l'histoire de son grand-père qui revenait des camps et puis qui a fini par retrouver la personne qui avait dénoncé sa famille et puis par la tuer à la sortie d'une grange. Donc c'est le thème de la revanche, de la vengeance qui nous a intéressés. Et quand on a fait des recherches sur ce sujet unique, on a réalisé qu'il n'avait jamais été exploré. Et c'est là que nous nous sommes penchés sur l'histoire entourant Plan A. Et ça nous a pris 2 films avant d'en arriver là. Go ahead, Susan.
Okay, thank you. So your last 2 films were pure fiction. This is your first foray into directing a film on a true subject. So can you tell me what liberties you took, you know, in terms of the main characters, what is true and what is fabricated? So I'll let you translate. One sec. Do you need to, Jules?
Yeah. Alors, à la différence de vos 2 premiers films, pour celui-ci, vous vous inspirez d'une histoire vraie. J'aimerais maintenant savoir dans quelle mesure est-ce que vous avez été fidèle à la réalité et plus particulièrement au niveau des personnages. Go ahead.
That's a really good question because we are not historians, we are filmmakers. And of course, this is a true story, but we were really attracted to the emotions and to the drama. But it was all there. We find out when we did our research, and the first thing we did when we decided that this would be our project, we met some of the survivors that were still alive, the real Avengers. And we asked them a lot of questions. Of course, a lot of it was in Dina Porat's book, and of course, in all kinds of other documents we read. But we were more attracted to the emotional. What does it mean not to go on with your life after losing all that you had and or losing everyone? What does it mean not to do what most of the survivors did, and that's moving on with their life? But what does it mean to stay on Germany's soil and to try to kill and to have revenge with the people that your colleagues at work and your neighbors, and they were surrounded by people that they actually try to kill. And we were fascinated about this subject, and we asked them many, many questions about that. And then we wrote the script based on true events. All the dots were there. It's amazing, true story. But we gave ourselves some freedom drawing the lines between the dots. Most of the characters are fiction based on real characters, but sometimes we merged a few characters into one, and we needed to have some kind of freedom, creativity freedom. But most of the dots and everything that happened regarding facts really happened. And just one more thing, when we did our research, we were so happy to find out that these 2 groups of Avengers, the Jewish Brigade and then the Abba Kovner's group, they actually met. They had this historic meeting in the middle of the night, and this allowed us to have these 2 groups in one film because they actually connected. And we used this meeting in order to have our fictional character, Max, moving from the Jewish Brigade to the Abba Kovner's group. Okay, I'm done.
And so that interaction... sorry.
Eh bien, c'est une très bonne question. De nature, nous ne sommes pas des historiens, mais plutôt des réalisateurs. Alors, ce qui nous a attirés au-delà de l'histoire, c'est l'émotion, tout l'aspect dramatique qui entoure tout cela. Nous avons, dans le cadre de nos recherches, rencontré plusieurs survivants de cette époque, à qui nous avons posé de nombreuses questions. Nous sommes également basés sur le livre de Dina Porat pour retracer les faits. Et nous sommes intéressés à la question de savoir comment continuer sa vie quand on a perdu tous les êtres chers, quand on reste en Allemagne pour se venger de personnes qui ont tenté de nous éliminer. Donc, de façon générale, le script est basé, bien sûr, sur des faits réels, il suit la trame réelle, mais nous avons toutefois pris une certaine liberté pour relier les événements entre eux, pour mettre la sauce, si on peut dire, et certains des personnages ont par ailleurs été inspirés par plusieurs personnes. Nous avons fait un amalgame, et dans nos recherches, ce qui nous intéressait aussi, c'était de nous pencher sur les deux groupes, la Brigade Juive et Nakam, et de voir comment ils s'étaient rencontrés, et dans le film, la réunion avec Max, nous l'avons mise en scène pour le moment où il passe des Brigades Rouges à Nakam. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that you had connections, that you met with some of the people who really were involved with the plan. How many people are still alive? Did you have trouble connecting with them? Can you tell me a bit about the interactions that you had with the real people?
Mm-hmm. Sure. It was
wait, hold on. I think Jules has to.
Vous venez de parler des personnes qui étaient encore vivantes et que vous avez rencontrées. J'aimerais maintenant savoir combien est-ce qu'il y en avait et si vous avez eu de la difficulté ou si c'était facile d'interagir avec eux et de leur tirer les verres du nez. Go ahead.
Okay, so yeah, it was an amazing process for me and Yoav while working on this subject because it took us so many years and we dived into this amazing group of people. And we met, with the help of Dina Porat, of course, we met the original Avengers. And originally there were around 50 people, led by Abba Kovner, of course. But I think, I'm not really sure about the numbers, but as far as I know, there's now about 3 left, still alive. We had a very emotional screening a few months ago in Israel when one of them came to the screening. He's 101 years old. And he came and he was really emotional. It was overwhelming for him to see the story. But we met an amazing group of people and we had amazing talks with them, conversations. And it was so interesting to dive into their heads and to see their perspective on revenge. And the one thing they always said to us, and it's carved in our brain, and this is something we wanted to portray in the movie, is that they always said, don't try to judge us by today's standards. Don't try to think about this subject in your safe home in Israel, when you have a safe place to live and everything. Try to put yourself in our position, hot-blooded young men and women, 22, 23 years old, who lost everything. And that's how you need to judge us. And that's what we're trying to do in the movie, to throw the question to the audience.
And I think you do. Okay, Jules, before I pick up on that, I'll let Jules.
Eh bien, c'était une expérience très chouette. Ça nous a pris de nombreuses années de faire nos recherches pour ce film. Je pense qu'à la base, il y avait une cinquantaine de personnes dans le groupe là-bas. Il n'en reste maintenant que plus que 3 survivants. Il y a quelques mois, d'ailleurs, nous avons fait une projection du film en Israël et l'un des survivants, qui était alors âgé de 101 ans, est venu assister à la projection et était extrêmement ému. Nous avons eu avec ces gens d'excellentes discussions, notamment pour savoir ce que la vengeance voulait dire pour eux. Nous voulions savoir qu'est-ce qui les avait motivés. Et ce qui en est ressorti, c'est qu'ils nous demandaient de ne pas les juger avec un regard contemporain, mais plutôt de se mettre dans leurs souliers, les souliers de personnes qui étaient dans la jeune vingtaine, qui avaient tout perdu et qui avaient le sang chaud. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to pick up then, you said that there really was a meeting between Nakam and the Jewish Brigade. Mm-hmm. I'd like to, if you could tease out a little bit more the relationship between the two different groups and, you know, the friction between the two of them, if you could talk about the reality of that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Bien, vous disiez tantôt qu'il y avait une rencontre entre Nakam et les brigades juives. J'aimerais savoir si vous pouviez nous en dire un petit peu plus à ce sujet, s'il y avait eu des frictions, qu'est-ce qui les rapprochait, etc. Go ahead.
Well, of course, there was a big clash between the two groups, the Jewish Brigade and also the Haganah in Palestine and Ben Gurion and everyone here, all the leadership. They believed in a personal revenge. It's of course important to hunt down war criminals and to take revenge if possible. But when Abba Kovner reached the brigade and tried to have them on his side and let them in his ideas of biblical revenge, Then it was something that they were not able to relate to. And this is why it was very difficult for him to try to get the poison. Then he succeeded to get the poison in Israel, in Palestine, but he apparently lied for the purpose of the poison, and he said that it is to poison war criminals at camps, but not in order to kill civilians. And of course, this idea of biblical revenge or taking revenge on a national scale, was something very radical. And some historians say that it was Ben Gurion who snitched about, and the Haganah snitched about Abba Kovner to the Brits. And this is why he was in 1 year in prison later on, after Plan A failed. So some historians say that this is the reason they caught him on the boat with the poison. Some historians say that it was because of just pure bureaucracy, that they found out that there is illegal passenger on boat. But other than that, it was a very complicated clash. And we tried to have some focus on it in the film. Of course, the reality is much more complicated than you can portray in 90 minutes of a fiction film.
Absolutely. Okay.
Ok, eh bien, pour répondre à votre question, il y a de toute évidence eu un gros clash entre les deux groupes, que ce soit Haganah en Palestine ou Ben Gurion, pour qui la vengeance personnelle était très importante. Maintenant, quand Abba Gavner s'est joint au groupe, lui, son idée était plutôt d'adopter une approche de la vengeance avec des proportions bibliques, ce qui n'a pas touché les autres personnes présentes. Et c'est d'ailleurs sans doute pour cela qu'il a la difficulté à se procurer du poison et qu'il a dû mentir pour s'en procurer en allégeant que c'était pour tuer des criminels de guerre et non pas des citoyens ou des individus. Maintenant, au niveau des historiens, il y a deux écoles de pensée. On estime que, d'une part, Abba Gavner a été dénoncé aux Britanniques et c'est ce qui l'a amené à faire de la prison pendant 1 an. Et une autre école de pensée estime que ce serait au niveau de la bureaucratie qui a permis de détecter qu'il y avait des passagers clandestins. Maintenant, de façon générale, s'il s'agit d'un film de 90 minutes, et bien sûr, la réalité est encore beaucoup plus complexe qu'on a pu la résumer dans notre film. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Did you mentioned before when you started that you had the idea for the film for a while and you had made 2 other films. Mm-hmm. So were you thinking of this film beforehand? It took you a while to get. How did the process of making this film come about? Were there any obstacles in your way because it was a revenge drama? Did people, have a problem with that?
You want to...
Bien, maintenant, j'aimerais qu'on aborde le sujet de l'idée du film. Vous disiez tantôt que vous aviez fait 2 films auparavant. Est-ce que vous aviez l'idée pour celui-ci depuis longtemps? Et au niveau du processus de création, est-ce que ça a été facile ou est-ce que vous avez rencontré des obstacles de différentes sortes? Go ahead.
Yeah, so we started working on this film right after our first feature film was called Fobidilia, which was a very micro-budget movie.
And I saw it too.
Right. It was,
you were here for it.
Yeah, you were the one. Yeah, and it was we were very naive at the time. We didn't know anything, and it was a moonshot. We aimed so high, a periodical movie. It's such an expensive movie, and it was very difficult. But we said we wrote it without even thinking about it. We just wrote the script, and in Israel, you need to wait for the film funds, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of bureaucracy until you get the money. And in the meantime, we did, in the year passing by, we did The Golem and Jerusalem, 2 other movies. And then eventually we got the Israeli film fund. But then we had to convince the German film fund. And then we had to find private money and to build this to finance the movie. And just a few months before, just 2 months or 3 months before the shooting, everything stopped and collapsed, and we had to stop everything. And then it took us, and we told the crew and everyone to go back home. And me and Yoav was really devastated for 2 or 3 weeks. And then in a miracle way, we managed to build this the finance for this movie again, and we shot the movie a few months later. So all in all, it took us about 10 years to make this movie.
Eh bien, nous avons commencé à travailler sur ce film dès la sortie d'Obidilia, notre premier film à petit budget, à très petit budget. À l'époque, nous étions excessivement naïfs, on visait extrêmement haut. Nous avons d'ailleurs écrit le film sans même y penser, d'un jet. Il s'ensuit ensuite beaucoup d'attentes au niveau du financement, par exemple, et puis la bureaucratie n'est jamais très rapide. Donc, entre-temps, nous avons fait les deux films, Jérusalem et le Golem, puis nous avons obtenu le financement d'Israël, ensuite le financement de l'Allemagne, mais 2 ou 3 mois avant le tournage en tant que tel, tout a dû être arrêté subitement, et par une sorte de miracle, quelques mois plus tard, nous avons retrouvé le financement et avons donc pu aller de l'avant avec le film. Donc, de façon globale, je vous dirais que ce projet nous a pris à peu près une dizaine d'années. Go ahead, Fabien.
Okay. Well, while we're talking about the making of the film and the difficulties, what about the casting of the film? Were you always intending to have an international cast doing the film in England? How did those pieces fall into place?
Eh bien, maintenant, au niveau de la distribution des rôles, est-ce que vous aviez toujours, dès le départ, l'idée d'en faire une production internationale ou est-ce que c'est venu plus tard? Go ahead.
Yeah, we always wanted to have a combination of Israeli cast and European cast because there were two different groups. It was the beginning of the film starts with the Jewish brigade, strong, young, fearless Israelis. So it was, of course, very important for us to cast Israelis for this project and for this part. And we were lucky to have Michael Aloni, which is a great friend and an amazing actor. And then there was the second part, which is more European. These people grew up in Germany and in some other countries in Europe. And it was important for us not to have Israeli actors faking an accent or something like that. So we wanted to feel the difference and to feel the difference in energies between this casting. So we had a very interesting combination of Israeli actors and also Ishaï Golan, who played Abba Kovner, and we worked with Ishaï before, and he's supposed to join us later on, I understand. He's a great guy and a great actor. So we were lucky to have a really interesting combination of these actors. And yeah, we are very, and of course we were lucky to have August Diehl in the main lead. August is getting so many scripts that he always passes. And when he read this script, he called his manager immediately and he said, I want to be in the film. I don't mind anything, I want to be in it. And we were so lucky to have him. He's such a wonderful actor. And also Sylvia Hooks, straight from Blade Runner, she came to our film. It was really mind-blowing to see how people like A-listers, actors reacted to the script and just wanted to take part in the film.
Right, Jules?
Eh bien, nous voulions, pour la production, avoir un mélange d'acteurs israéliens et d'acteurs européens. Dans la première partie du film, où on met en scène la brigade juive, on a pu compter sur l'excellent travail de Michael Aloni, qui est un très bon ami, un excellent acteur. Et puis ensuite, pour la deuxième partie, plus européenne, on voulait mettre en scène des gens qui avaient grandi en Europe ou en Allemagne. On ne voulait pas d'acteurs israéliens qui feraient semblant de parler avec un accent allemand. On voulait vraiment faire sentir la différence, mais aussi l'énergie. On a également pu compter sur l'aide d'Auguste, l'acteur principal, qui est un acteur extrêmement demandé, mais quand il a eu le script, il a immédiatement voulu en faire partie. S'il en va de même pour Sylvia Hooks, qui avait joué dans Blade Runner, qui était littéralement conquise par le scénario. Et c'était génial de voir un si grand nombre d'acteurs de cette trempe être très enthousiasmés par le projet. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The film is about plan A. There was also a plan B, which is not talked about at all. Is that a conscious decision? Why did you decide not to include that in the film?
Le film traite, comme tout le monde le sait, bien sûr, du plan A. Mais ce que l'on ne sait peut-être pas, c'est qu'il y avait également un plan B que vous avez choisi de ne pas aborder dans ce film. Quelle en serait la raison, s'il vous plaît?
Yeah, yeah. There was. Plan B is another story. Who could be another movie, by the way, because it's such an amazing story about what happened is that after Plan A, all the group of Avengers were scattered around Europe. Abba Kovner was prisoned, and the Avengers didn't want to go back to Israel. They had to do something, so they went out to another operation called Plan B, which is actually what happened is that the American allies kept 13,000 war prisoners, SS soldiers, inside the camps. They were in one of the camps they had, and the Avengers one night sneak into the bakery that gave the bread to the SS soldiers, and in one night they covered around 3,000 loaves of bread with poison. After a very sophisticated operation, they had to sneak in to build a floor beneath the bakery. It was a really big operation. Eventually, they managed to insert the poison to the bread, and the next morning, the Allied soldiers gave this bread to the SS soldiers. And now there's two versions for this as a conclusion. One, the Avengers claim that they managed to kill several tens of SS soldiers, maybe even hundreds. But the Allied soldiers claim, like in a newspaper, there's a famous article about it, and they say there was only a food poisoning in one of the in a prison camps, and no SS soldiers were killed. So nobody knows the real answer for that. But there is a theory that the Allies didn't want they quieted it down and silenced it because they didn't want to make any panic in the war prisoners. But who knows? Anyway, originally it was in the script, but we decided to take it out because it was too much. It was too long.
No, but it would make a very interesting other film, that's for certain.
Right. That's the sequel. Plan B should be the sequel.
I mean, if anybody can unearth what actually really did happen, and if anyone really was killed, or...
Right.
Eh bien, écoutez, le plan B est une autre histoire à part entière dont on pourrait certainement faire un autre film qui pourrait d'ailleurs en être la suite. Les Vengeurs étaient répartis en Europe, ils ne voulaient pas, après le plan A, ils ne désiraient pas retourner en Israël. Et à l'époque, les alliés américains avaient des camps de prisonniers SS en Europe et les Vengeurs décident alors d'entrer par effraction dans une boulangerie et de couvrir environ 3000 miches de pain de poison pour empoisonner les soldats SS. Alors, c'est une entreprise qui était très compliquée. Ils ont dû construire une pièce sous la boulangerie, empoisonner les miches de pain, qu'ensuite les Alliés ont fini par donner aux soldats SS. Alors, selon les Vengeurs, ils auraient tué une centaine de soldats SS après cet empoisonnement, mais si on se fie aux journaux de l'époque, il s'agit tout simplement d'un empoisonnement alimentaire. La vraie réponse demeure un mystère. Il est fort possible que l'état-major allié ait préféré ne pas cautionner la version des morts pour éviter de créer un vent de panique dans ces camps de prisonniers. Go ahead.
I want to get back to Abba Kovner for a minute, because I mean, I knew him as a famous Israeli poet. I did not really know this part of the story about Nakam and Plan A. So how was researching that? Is there a lot of documentation that you were able to find about Abba Kovner and his part in Nakam?
Eh bien, j'aimerais qu'on revienne sur Abba Kovner, que tout le monde presque connaît en tant que poète israélien de renom. Est-ce que vous avez éprouvé de la difficulté à vous procurer de la documentation au sujet de son plan et de l'histoire de Nakam? Go ahead.
Well, there were a few documentaries about the subject. There were, of course, books, a few of them. And of course, Dina Porat's research, and she published a book about the subject. Actually, this year she published a book, but she also wrote a biography about Abba Kovner. So of course, there were people that knew about this unique story. But overall, us as growing up in Israel, or our friends or our families, we never knew about this story. And it's, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think it's a very controversial story. Actually, it's a group of Jewish terrorists in a way. And it's a very complicated subject to deal with. And and so on and so on. And so I think there were good reasons that for many years no one really talked about it. Also, there were a lot of people, even our friends, that when we pitched them the project, what we're working on, so they got really scared to say, oh, why are you telling this kind of story? Should the world know about it? It can portray Jews and Israelis in Israel in a really bad way, etc., etc. But for us, we believe this is the time to tell this story. It's a very, of course, there were the exceptionals. It was a very small group that tried to do something. The majority of the Holocaust survivors, of course, didn't take any revenge and moved on with their life. And for them, that was the real revenge. But for us, it was a very big and important question to raise and to ask, and also to deal with Abba Kovner's legacy and what he believed in, which is stopping this. They believe that the cycle of Jews being killed and persecuted, they believe that this is the only way to stop this cycle, and to do something very dramatic, and to do something that will shake history and will change the course of history. This is what they believed. And yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that Jules could translate, because that's a long.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I'm done.
No, because I want to pick up on that.
Oh, someone is joining us.
Oh.
Okay, so I'll translate quickly. Il y avait quelques documentaires sur le sujet, des livres, bien sûr, la recherche de Tina Para, qui a d'ailleurs sorti un livre sur le sujet cette année. Maintenant, à notre niveau, nous avons grandi en Israël, mais nous n'avions jamais entendu parler de cet aspect-là. C'est une histoire qui est très controversée, qui peut faire passer les Juifs pour des terroristes, n'ayons pas peur des mots. Quand nous avons proposer le projet en France, par exemple, certaines personnes ont pris peur, ils se demandaient pourquoi est-ce qu'on voulait raconter ça, ils craignaient que ça ne donne pas une bonne image des Juifs. Mais il faut se rappeler que pour plan A, il s'agit d'un très petit groupe de personnes. La plupart des survivants ont au contraire poursuivi leur existence, et ça a été ça leur victoire. Maintenant, pour Abba Kovner, lui, il croyait que le cycle de la persécution des Juifs et des assassinats ne prendrait fin qu'après une action dramatique, véritablement d'envergure, qui, à proprement parler, pourrait radicalement changer le cours de l'histoire. Go ahead.
Okay, so hello, Ishaï, and I've got a whole bunch of questions for you too, but I do want to pick up on where you left off before. And maybe, Ishaï, you can also answer this question. So a lot of people, had this reaction, oh no, you're showing Jews in vigilante justice. How is that going to be accepted? Jews as terrorists, Jews not being victims, but taking matters into their own hand. Once the film was released, what was the reaction from people in Israel?
Well, actually, sorry.
Sorry, bonjour Ishaï, vous pouvez également répondre à la question si vous le désirez. Il y a de nombreuses personnes, comme vous l'avez indiqué, qui pensaient que ce n'était pas une bonne idée de mettre en scène des Juifs sous forme de justiciers ou de terroristes, mais une fois que le film est sorti, quelle a été la réaction du public? Go ahead, Yoav.
Actually, the film is not out in Israel yet, so we are very intense to see how the audience is going to accept the film, how the reactions are going to be. We are quite sure we're going to get all kinds of reactions. But what we do know is from 2-3 private screenings, small screenings. One of them is the Haifa Film Festival. We had amazing reactions, and people were out of the cinema with tears in their eyes and very emotional, and they wanted to study more about the subject. And I know that our goal was to raise the subject and to make people asking questions, to have people investigating more, reading books about it, seeing documentaries about it. Of course, we cannot have everything in one feature film. It's such a big subject to deal with. But the emotions that we got from these 3 screenings were amazing.
Oh, okay.
Eh bien, le film n'est pas encore sorti en Israël. Et à ce sujet, on appréhende beaucoup la réaction du public, mais nous avons déjà d'ores et déjà procédé à 3 projections privées et avons reçu un super accueil. Les gens sortaient avec des larmes aux yeux, ils étaient très émus, la plupart voulaient en savoir plus. Et c'est vraiment ce qu'on cherchait à faire à travers ce film, c'est à familiariser les gens avec cette histoire et à les inciter à en apprendre davantage sur le sujet, parce que à travers un film de 90 minutes, c'est une question si vaste que l'on ne peut pas couvrir tous les aspects. Correct.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Ishaï, I want to ask you a couple of questions now. So my first one is a two-part question. What drew you to the role, and how much did you know about Kovner before working on Plan A? What kind of research did you do into Abba?
Eh bien, Ishaï, maintenant une question pour vous. C'est une question en 2 parties. J'aimerais savoir ce qui, tout d'abord, vous a attiré dans le rôle, et ensuite savoir ce que vous connaissiez avant d'accepter le rôle sur le personnage que vous incarnez à l'écran.
Well, first of all, hi, very happy to be here. There was an enormous difference between, as an Israeli, growing up in Israel, Abba Kovner was a very known figure in our childhood. I mean, it was a known name. Everyone knew the name. Everyone knew of him. But we actually, I never knew of this part of his history. What I knew, he was a poet, and there was his very famous testimony in the Eichmann trials. So he was a very known figure. Almost an Israeli hero, so to speak. But then in the context of this film, I actually never knew about Plan A or B or any of this. And so it was quite shocking and exciting to discover this aspect of his life. And it made it turned him from a figure into something very humane, very human, and I just found it just so intriguing and interesting to meet I've never stopped and thought about people at this point in time in history where they just came out of the camps, and their emotional response and their sense of revenge was so enormous and powerful. And it's an aspect of the Holocaust that was never exposed before. And it was shocking to discover this side in Abba Kovner.
Before Jewel translate, I'd like to say thank you for saying that, because I thought maybe I was totally ignorant for not knowing about his role in Plan A. You know, I knew him as a poet. It isn't something that is sort of, certainly in his image overseas, that's not how you view Abba Kovner. So I'm glad that it was like that in Israel too. Okay, Jewel?
Eh bien, je suis très heureux d'être ici. Il y a une grande différence en tant que juif ayant grandi en Israël. Pour nous, Abba est une figure historique très connue. On le connaît en tant que poète, en tant que témoin au procès Anzai, mais dans le contexte du film, ce qui était choquant, enfin tout du moins surprenant et intéressant, c'était de découvrir cet aspect de sa vie que j'ignorais complètement. Ça m'a permis d'adopter une perspective plus humaine sur l'homme, alors que je n'avais moi-même jamais songé à ce moment précis de l'histoire où ces personnes sont libérées des camps et sont nourries par un énorme désir de vengeance. Ce à quoi Susan rajoute qu'elle est très heureuse qu'il le mentionne, parce que se sentait un peu bête elle-même de ne pas connaître cet aspect de la vie d'Abba qui était uniquement connu à ses yeux comme poète. Go ahead.
I could just say on that note, if that's okay, that and maybe Yoav and Doron can give more information, but I think he made an effort to keep this part of his history, of his background, a secret. It wasn't until very late in their lives that they revealed these stories. And is that correct? Doron?
Let Joel translate and then you can answer. Thanks.
Je crois, pour rester sur le sujet, que pas comme les autres personnes, ont tout fait jusqu'à très récemment pour garder cet aspect de leur vie secret. Mais peut-être que je me trompe.
I think what happened with to be honest, I don't know exactly about Abba Kovner and his relationship in the early years about this subject, but I know the original Avengers didn't want to talk about it for tens of years. Nobody ever talked about this subject. Nobody ever talked about the Holocaust until the 60s in Israel. This is the crazy part. Only in Eichmann trial, when the people went on stage and start talking about what happened to them, the public opinion in Israel changed and people started talking about the Holocaust. That's one thing. The second thing, even in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the 2000s, the original Avengers, they didn't want to talk about this subject so much. And I remember one of the Yosef Hamatz, one of the commander of the Nuremberg cell in Plan A, he told us that he was interviewed once, I think it was in the 90s or 80s, for a German television station, and of course he asked to be not recognized, as in the shadow, and he even kept a gun under his chair because he was so afraid. He didn't know how people will react to it. So they were really not willing to talk about this subject until recent years, and that's why I think it's so special about this story, that I think this story, like Plan A, could be told now. It wouldn't be recepted so easily 30, 40, 50 years ago, 20 years ago even.
Eh bien, pour Abba Ravner, je ne sais pas, mais il est clair que les Vengeurs ne voulaient absolument pas en parler. Il faut aussi se rappeler qu'avant les années 60, on ne parlait même pas de l'Holocauste en Israël. Ce n'est qu'après l'avènement du procès Eichmann que l'on a commencé à aborder à nouveau le sujet. Au niveau des Vengeurs, il y avait même l'un dégradé de la cellule de Nuremberg qui a accordé une entrevue à la télé allemande. Il avait exigé que son visage soit masqué et pendant toute l'entrevue, il avait gardé un pistolet sous sa chaise tellement il appréhendait la réaction que sa confession pouvait en faire. Donc, je pense que le film est sorti au bon moment parce que maintenant, il est possible d'en parler alors que ça aurait été impossible il y a 10, 20, 30, 40 ans. Correct.
Okay, Ishaï, is Ishaï still there? Because I have a question for him, but he seems to...
No, I'm here.
You are here. Okay, I just can't see you. All right. Well, you decided to work with Doron and Yoav only 2 years after doing the Golem, so I assume you like working with them. Can you tell us a bit about what it's like to work with them both, and how much freedom do you have to create your own character? Was everything scripted? Were you allowed to ad-lib? If you could just talk about the process of working with everyone.
Eh bien, Ishaï, une question pour vous. Vous retravaillez avec les deux frères 2 ans après avoir tourné le Golem avec eux. Comment est-ce que vous envisagez le travail avec eux et dans quelle mesure est-ce qu'on vous accorde la liberté pour façonner votre personnage? Go ahead, Ishaï.
I was really overjoyed to have the opportunity to work with Doron and Yoav again after we did the Golem, which was just an outstanding experience for all of us, I think, but for me definitely. But then, and so I was very happy when they approached me with this project. Even though it was very different in its atmosphere and in its scale, and the genre. And on one hand, it was different. What's amazing about working with Yoav and Doron, they're so different from one another, so definitively different, that at the end, it seems like you're working with one person that just has, that's in conflict with himself somehow. And sometimes you see this side of him and sometimes you see the other side of him. But their differences somehow join into this one symbiosis. It's hard to explain, but in this, they have this weird chemistry that through this impossible disagreement, they reach a wonderful agreement in the end, and these wonderful ideas come out. But their set is always has a great atmosphere, really, and they give a lot of they trust their actors fully. It seems, and that's always a very satisfying feeling for actors, where you really get a sense that the directors, they created the whole premise, and then they place you inside, and they trust you to do the right thing. And I'm very grateful for that always when I work with them. And it seems mutual, like we always feel there's a lot of creativity, and we reach results that we're all very happy with. So
were the rest of us.
That was a mess of an answer, but yeah.
No, perfect. Jules?
Yep.
I'm going to apologize. I'm going to be with you only on audio. I'll still hear you, but you won't see me. Okay, I apologize.
That's okay, but thank you for joining us. It's nice to meet you, and we'll still speak over.
Okay, same here. Thank you.
Okay. Pour en revenir à ce que disait Ishaï, j'étais extrêmement heureux de cette nouvelle expérience après le travail qu'on avait fait ensemble sur le Golem, qui était une expérience formidable. Pour ce film, l'atmosphère, la portée, le genre et le budget étaient bien sûr très différents. Et quand je travaille avec Yoav et Doron, ils sont presque aux antipodes l'un de l'autre. Ils sont très différents, mais au final, c'est comme si je travaillais avec une seule et même personne à deux facettes. Il y a une super symbiose entre eux. On peut parler d'une belle alchimie malgré des différences d'opinion assez marquées. Au niveau du tournage, il y a toujours une super atmosphère, et les deux réalisateurs accordent beaucoup de confiance à leurs acteurs. C'est des réalisateurs qui plantent le décor et qui vous font confiance et vous laissent aller et explorer. Et c'est un sentiment mutuel de confiance qui nourrit la créativité et qui est très, très agréable. Go ahead.
Okay, well, it's funny that Ishaï was talking about how the two of you are like one person in conflict with each other. So when you are making a film, I mean, do you sort of have conflict on set, or do you, talk about certain things while the filming is going on, or do you think you have most of it worked out and blocked before you come to meet your actors? How much changes from what you have in mind before you start shooting and when you start shooting?
Ishaï parlait des différences d'opinion que vous pouvez avoir et d'être en conflit l'un avec l'autre. Est-ce que c'est des discussions qui précèdent le tournage ou le démarrage du film, ou est-ce que c'est des dissensions qui perdurent durant le tournage et que vous arrivez à planir en cours de route? Go ahead.
Well, shooting the film is maybe the shortest process in the entire process, because it's a rock and roll. The very long and exhausting processes before the shooting it's a very long voyage, and of course a lot of preparation. And during this time, me and Doron, we have the same taste in cinema, and we quite think the same in a lot of ways. So before the shooting is okay. While we shoot, usually it's okay, because it's just rock and roll. You just, you don't have the time to argue. You don't even have the time to stop and think about stuff. You just run with it. And then the fighting starts later on in the editing room, because then you have all the time in the world, and then everyone wanted to try something different. So when we were editing the film, the walls of the editing room were shaking. But other than that, I think we have a good collaboration between us.
Eh bien, vous savez, avant le tournage, tous les préparatifs, c'est pour ainsi dire vraiment rock and roll. Il y a beaucoup d'étapes à franchir et honnêtement, on n'a juste pas le temps d'argumenter ou de se disputer. Il faut foncer, il faut aller de l'avant. Après, c'est une autre histoire. Après, c'est là que les dissensions ressortent et pendant, par exemple, la mise en place du film, l'édition, là, on pouvait voir les murs de la salle qui tremblaient tellement on avait des échanges intenses. Go ahead.
Oh, I see that we're getting close to almost an hour here. I don't want to keep you guys for too long, but I want to know, what are the release plans? When will it be released in Israel? When can everybody around the world see the film?
Cela fait bientôt 1 heure que nous sommes ensemble, donc je ne veux pas vous retenir plus qu'il ne faut, mais j'aimerais savoir quels sont les plans pour la sortie du film en Israël et quand est-ce que vous allez pouvoir le montrer au reste du monde. Go ahead.
Okay, like in every situation, a lot of films these days, the COVID shuffled the cards, and it's a very complicated answer. So in a way, we were lucky enough to shoot before COVID, but this is a miracle. But of course, the release of the movie is very strange. It's happening around the world as we speak. Started out in Japan and UK and Spain, and I think it's traveling around the world.
Germany.
And in a very unique COVID kind of way. The thing
is it in theater?
Sorry?
Is it in theater, or are you releasing it?
In Germany? It was released in Germany a month ago, and it was like 30 or 40 screens in Germany, all around Germany. But you know, cinemas are it's a very complicated situation now with cinemas. So it's going more and more towards streaming. But it's getting an exposure, just not the usual way we usually used to. And in Israel, we're hopefully going to be released spring or summer. We're going to have some time for that. Hopefully April, maybe June. But there is such a traffic jam of movies waiting from the lockdowns. So it's like, it's going to be a process. But we're going to get there.
Eh bien, comme pour de nombreux films, comme vous en doutez certainement, Covid a radicalement changé la donne. Nous avons eu la chance de pouvoir tourner avant l'avènement de la pandémie. À l'heure actuelle, le film est projeté au Japon, au Royaume-Uni, en Espagne. Il est sorti en Allemagne le mois dernier sur une 30aine ou une 40aine d'écrans. Il n'en demeure pas moins que la situation est très compliquée et qu'on s'achemine certainement vers une diffusion plutôt en ligne. Au niveau de la sortie en salle en Israël, on espère que cela aura lieu au printemps ou à l'été, autour du mois de juin. Mais il faut bien comprendre qu'avec les restrictions sanitaires et tout cela, il y a beaucoup de films déjà en attente et ça crée une sorte de bouchon, si on peut dire. Go ahead.
Well, after your epic battles in the editing room, will you two be working together again, or will you go your separate ways? Are you working on anything together now?
Eh bien, après vos dissensions énormes lorsque vous avez fait l'édition du film, est-ce que malgré tout, vous pensez continuer à travailler sur un autre projet ensemble?
Yeah, we are working together. It's all good, and we are working actually on a TV show right now. We're very thrilled about it, and we are writing it these days, and hopefully we're going to shoot it next year. So that's something we are very passionate about, and that's the next big thing.
And so this is your first foray into television?
We directed a few television shows, but this is the first one that we write and direct, not only direct.
Eh bien, ne vous en faites pas, tout va bien. Nous continuons à travailler ensemble. Nous avons d'ailleurs commencé à travailler sur un projet d'émission de télé dont le tournage devrait commencer l'année prochaine. Et nous sommes très excités. On avait déjà travaillé sur des émissions de télé, mais c'est la première fois que nous sommes à la fois les rédacteurs et les réalisateurs. Go ahead.
Okay. Fabienne, I think I'm getting a message here that we have a few questions from the audience. So if we can somehow move over to have Fabienne come on screen and ask the questions from the festival, I'm not quite sure how.
Okay.
Nous allons maintenant passer aux questions du public.
There we are.
Oui.
Okay.
Julien, je te donne les questions en français, tu les traduis?
Yeah.
Ok. Alors, il y a plusieurs questions sur le film et sur la vision des spectateurs, en fait, du public qui a vu ici le film en France. Alors, première question. Il y a plusieurs acteurs juifs dans le film, notamment les deux acteurs, trois acteurs principaux qui jouent donc le rôle de personnages juifs. Que pensez-vous de la polémique autour de l'actrice non-juive Hélène Mirren, qui joue le rôle de Golda Meir dans un film qui va sortir prochainement? Selon vous, doit-on être de culture juive ou de la culture en fait du personnage qu'on incarne?
Okay, so there's a few questions from the audience about the movie and the public's reactions. The first question regards the fact that in your movie there are several Jewish actors. There are three main characters are Jewish. And the question is about Hélène Mirren, who will be portraying Golda Meir. And they'd like to know if it's important or vital for to be of Jewish origin to portray such characters. Go ahead.
I know some people do mind about it. For us, we were just looking for the best actor we can get and the one who will be right for the job, without thinking about his, religious. Because, again, what does it mean to be a Jew? Like, how does a Jew needs to look? How does a Jew needs to act? It's a very complicated question. We live here in Israel, and we have Israelis, Jews friends that are from Russian, and we have from Ethiopia. There are Jews in so many varieties and all kinds of characters, and from the outside and from the inside. So it's a very complicated question. What does it mean to be a Jew? So the answer is that we decided to leave this question aside. It's not relevant for the story. It's not relevant for the making of the film. And what was relevant is to get the most moving and great actor that will be right for the part. That was the only thing that was in our mind when we casted the film.
Eh bien, certaines personnes, de toute évidence, se préoccupent de la question. En ce qui nous concerne, on voulait simplement avoir les meilleurs acteurs pour les rôles, ceux qui seraient le plus à même de faire parler l'émotion. Au final, à quoi est-ce qu'un juif doit ressembler? C'est une question très complexe. Nous, ici en Israël, nous avons des amis juifs, mais ce sont des juifs d'Éthiopie, des juifs de Russie, de l'extérieur comme de l'intérieur. Selon nous, ce n'était pas pertinent pour l'histoire ni pour le tournage du film. Encore une fois, on voulait simplement s'attacher les services d'acteurs qui seraient le plus à même de remplir les rôles qu'on leur confiait.
Merci. Alors, une autre question. Dans les films qui concernent la thématique de la Shoah, on montre souvent les Juifs comme des victimes. Est-ce que votre film consistait aussi à montrer les Juifs sous un autre angle, sous l'angle de, non plus de vengeurs, mais vraiment de combattants, de personnes qui n'ont pas été, entre guillemets, menés à l'abattoir, hein, mais qui réellement ont souhaité se révolter, même si dans votre film, on est donc au sortir de la guerre en 1945, mais est-ce qu'il y a quand même cette idée-là de montrer une autre image des Juifs durant la Shoah?
There are a lot of movies about the Shoah, and typically the Jews are portrayed as victims. I was wondering if within your film you wanted to give the audience a different perspective on Jews, portray them as fighters and not as docile people going to get killed with a smile.
Yeah. So I don't know if fighters is the right word, but we did want to portray, to shed a light on this subject that nobody ever talked about in Israel, and I think in the world, not really, especially at least not in cinema, about revenge. And we know about in the history, we know about the Russians really taking revenge in Nazis. We know about a lot of countries and people taking revenge in Nazis, but there are hardly ever stories about Jews taking revenge. And I think there is a reason that people not talk about this subject so much. Even David Ben-Gurion, when there was quotes of him saying that when you establish a new country, when you're building a new country like Israel, you can't build your country on these values, negative values like destruction and revenge and killing back. Exactly.
Ishaï. Ishaï. Okay, great.
Anyway, yeah, so you can't build a country about these values, and you need to establish a country about positive values. And so I think that's the most, for me, this is the most interesting part of this story is why we didn't talk about it before. There is a very good reason this story about Plan A were not talked about before. And even Israelis that know, they think like us, they know everything about the Holocaust and the Holocaust stories. We didn't know about this story. And there is a specific reason for that.
Okay, thank you.
Eh bien, je ne saurais dire si, effectivement, dans notre film, les Juifs sont des combattants. Ce qui nous importait essentiellement, c'était d'aborder la question de vengeance, de revanche. C'est une question qui a été abordée chez les Russes et à travers le monde, mais pas du point de vue des Juifs. Et je pense que j'aimerais citer Ben Gurion, qui disait que lorsqu'on établit un nouveau pays, on ne saurait s'inspirer de valeurs sordides et négatives. Il faut le bâtir sur des valeurs qui sont positives. Et ceci explique peut-être le fait qu'on n'en ait pas parlé avant ce moment, même pour des gens juifs comme nous qui pensions tout connaître de l'Holocauste, ce n'était absolument pas quelque chose dont nous étions au courant. Okay.
Merci. Alors, nous avons ce soir des questions de professeurs d'histoire en France qui vous disent que chaque année, il y a plusieurs films sur la Shoah qui sortent en France et dans le monde. Cette année, il y a eu par exemple Anne Frank du réalisateur Harry Folman ou Les leçons persanes de Vadim Perelman. Pour vous, le cinéma doit-il être un vecteur important pour transmettre l'histoire de la Shoah ou doit-on vraiment rester dans la fiction?
Okay, so we have a few questions today from history teachers here in France. Each year there are several movies made about the Shoah. For example, this year there were Anne Frank or the Persians lessons. The question goes as follows: is it important to use movies to talk about the Shoah and instruct, or should we leave that aspect out of the movies? Go ahead.
Can you rephrase?
Yeah, I didn't understand. It's like, is it like in a general question? Like if it's okay to show it, in our opinion, to show it to students?
Well, is it okay to use movies as a history tool to teach people what transpired in the Shoah?
Of course. Well, of course, this story is a very unique one. It doesn't tell about the majority of the Holocaust survivors, of course, who didn't take any revenge. But for us, from this minority, a unique minority, you can learn about the majority who didn't take revenge. And it's a very interesting question that unfortunately is still relevant till today. Revenge is a very relevant subject because in every conflict zone, of course in Israel, but in other places around the world, everywhere there's a conflict, there's always the question of revenge. Someone did this to me, should I do this to him? And like, till when this cycle go on? So we wanted to raise the subject of revenge. And yeah, I think it's very important for younger generation to be exposed to this story and to have a discussion about it and to raise it, to raise the subject, of course, yes.
Eh bien, l'histoire que nous avons abordée est très particulière. Il ne s'agit pas de tous les aspects de la Shoah, mais à travers notre film, nous avons voulu montrer qu'on peut apprendre des choses sur la majorité en regardant ce qui s'est passé pour une minorité de personnes. La majorité n'a pas cherché à se venger, mais le thème de la revanche, de la vengeance, c'est une perspective universelle inhérente à tous les conflits et est à notre sens très important d'aborder la question et de susciter une conversation par après sur le sujet.
Merci. Doron et Yoav, quel regard portez-vous sur la création cinématographique israélienne aujourd'hui, donc dans votre pays, d'un point de vue général? Et d'après vous, est-ce que le succès des séries comme Fauda, par exemple, fait de l'ombre au cinéma?
Okay, so this question is about your take on the filmmaking industry in Israel, and people would like to know if making television series such as Fauda, if it's detrimental to the movie industry as well.
If it's related to the movie,
no. If it's a bad thing to make fictions like that, or I don't know the series they're talking about.
Fauda, yeah.
Fauda or Khatoufim.
Yeah. I hope I understand the question correctly. I would just answer that what's happening now in television, it's needless to say, it's the gold rush of television. And I think Israel is taking a very crucial part, not crucial, but very big part in this. There's so many stories here in this small country, starting from Fauda and Khatoufim and Homeland, and the list goes on. And I think what's happening now with the streaming, that Netflix and all the streaming, the streaming battles is taking us to a good place when languages are barrier, the bridges are built, and it's not just American TV ruling the world now. And there's so much stories from so many places around the world, from Korea and from Taiwan and from the Nords and of course from Israel. So of course Fauda is one of the flagships of this phenomenon, and everybody knows about Fauda, but there's so many good stories now in Israel, and the industry now is booming. And we're very proud to be part of this wave that brings out local stories, but also in a very global way and international stories. Hope I answered the question.
Ok, bien à l'heure actuelle en Israël, c'est la ruée vers l'or dans l'industrie de la télévision, que ce soit avec Fauda, Homeland, les plateformes de streaming permettent une plus grande exposition. Il ne s'agit plus simplement des États-Unis qui imposent leur vision du monde. On le voit avec bien sûr la Corée en ce moment, mais bien sûr en Israël qui en profite également. Et on veut être le porte-étendard de cette tendance, et nous sommes très fiers d'en faire partie et de pouvoir mettre en scène des histoires locales et sur une scène mondiale.
Merci. Et enfin, on va prendre la dernière question parce qu'il est un peu tard. Doron et Yoav Paz, quels sont les réalisateurs qui vous ont inspiré dans votre travail jusqu'à présent, et quels sont les réalisateurs qui vous inspirent voilà, aujourd'hui?
So the last question, this person would like to know which filmmakers are a great source of inspiration for you guys.
Well, our father is a filmmaker, so we grew up in a house that cinema is a big deal, and our father worshipped Fellini, and so we watched Fellini in a very young age, and also Hitchcock and everything. So we were exposed to the classics from an early age, but also we grew up in the 80s. So of course, going to the VHS store, and it was the most exciting thing that we could do, and and we saw everything. I think we saw horror films on a very young age.
Too early age.
Too early, and and all, of course, all the Spielberg's classics and everything. So I think our bread and butter was American cinema. That's what we like, and I think you can see it. I think maybe till today that we are trying to make cinema into a large audience as possible. I think even if you're telling a complicated story, doing a film is such a complicated thing. So when it's in the final part, you want large audience to be exposed to your films, and you're not doing a film to yourself. So in a way, even in Plan A, when it's a complicated story and a very complicated and sensitive subject, we wanted to approach large audience, and this is why we wrapped it in a thriller, an historical thriller way, that it can be revealing to people that that it will be also entertaining in a way.
Can I just
Sorry, I'll translate. Donc, bien, écoutez, chez nous, nous avons grandi avec un père réalisateur, donc ça a toujours été important pour nous d'être baigné dans les films. Lui, c'était un inconditionnel de Fellini, de Hitchcock, donc très jeune, nous avons été exposés aux classiques. Puis, il ne faut pas perdre de vue qu'on a grandi dans les années 80, donc on allait louer des films, des cassettes VHS, notamment des films d'épouvante qu'on a sûrement vus trop jeunes. On a regardé tous les films de Spielberg, on était très inspirés par le cinéma américain. Maintenant, pour le film Plané, c'est une histoire compliquée, un sujet sensible, et on voulait en faire un film, c'est pour ça qu'on en a fait un thriller historique qui soit accessible à un grand public. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say, you mentioned your father as a filmmaker. I just want your audience in France to know that if they're looking for a beautiful, beautiful film, Galilee Eskimos is one of my favorite films that your father directed. Yep.
Oh,
it's just a beautiful, beautiful film. So you can let your audience know.
We'll send it right away to our dad. He will be very happy to hear that.
J'aimerais mentionner, vu qu'on parlait de votre père cinéaste, recommander à votre public français un de ses très grands films, mon film préféré de lui, qui est Gather the Eskimos, rassembler les Esquimaux, traduction libre.
Ok, on va s'arrêter là. Thank you very much, Doron Yoav Paz. Merci infiniment, Suzanne, d'avoir mené cet entretien. Je m'adresse à vous, la public, pour vous dire que le festival Diasporama se poursuit jusqu'au 2 février. Vous pouvez encore voir ce soir jusqu'à minuit précise le film Plan A sur le site du festival, et puis tout le reste de la programmation jusqu'au 2 février. Une seule adresse, www.fffj.fr, fffj.fr, pour découvrir toute la programmation du festival. Et nous nous retrouvons très vite ici sur notre Facebook Live pour une nouvelle rencontre avec de nouveaux invités, de nouveaux réalisateurs. Merci et très bonne soirée.